I'm really excited to be here. This was my 1L classroom, I believe, and so the tables have literally turned. The instructor used to be up there. Such an exciting topic, and as the title of my paper intimates, I think we're in a moment right now in society where we're kind of just collectively trying to figure out where we are, what's happening now, what's going to happen tomorrow. And what so backing up, I volunteered to write about how AI is impacting civil litigation, which is sort of broad. It was kind of like Jonathan and Chris's paper, where it's how AI is impacting law in general. So my paper was a bit of a litany, kind of going through some of the ways in which AI is currently and will likely in the future impact law. But in order to get there, I did a survey of what technology is available on the market now and how lawyers that I know, just in my network, are using AI right now. So what does that mean? That means, well, for the first part, I just kind of I Googled around what products are out there, and I took a lot of product demos. I just said yes. These guys, they wanted to sell me on stuff. I said yes, yes, yes. And what I found was it's developing. It's still developed. Still, I would say at early stage. Many of the products, many of them are startups that seem to be operating. People are giving me product demos out of their bedrooms, out of their apartments. Of course, there are very advanced tools out there. Case text has already been thrown out there. That is advanced, although I have played around substantially with that. It is still somewhat early. And then I also surveyed lawyers, everyone from sole practitioners, plaintiffs' attorneys, to partners at big law, and said, hey, how are you using AI? And the answer was generally, I'm not. And often also followed by, I hope I don't have to. I'm hoping I will be able to get out of the practice of law by the time AI becomes a material consideration in my practice. And I also suspect that due to the incentive structure that attorneys have right now, people are using AI and don't want to admit it, or will be soon using AI and not wanting to talk about it. And there's a couple reasons. Of course, there are a lot of ethical considerations, which we're going to be talking about later. I think that's just fundamental. There's a lot of ethical things to unravel, and I think they can be unraveled in general. But what I always come back to, I'm just kind of like, those of us in this room, the practice of law is the business of law, right? And the business of law is still basically based on the billable hour. And so if suddenly we're rapidly streamlining so much of our work, that's a lot of billable hours that are kind of going out the door. And different practitioners and firms will have different ways of viewing that, of considering that. And I think it will take market pressures for practitioners and firms to adopt to AI, and those market pressures they're going to continue evolving. Clients are going to have concerns around the work quality, and firms have currently, I would say, they have the data to understand what each individual work product generally will cost them in terms of time. And the ability to process that data and understand what any given brief will probably cost a work product in terms of time, that's very much out there. But I think that the legal profession is going to have to be drawn kicking and screaming in many regards into the AI future. I'm not saying that they necessarily should be drawn, but I think there's going to be a lot more reluctance, status quo bias than many of the proselytizers of AI might believe. So that's just sort of my kind of prefatory remarks. I don't want to read my paper, which is a bit of a litany of how AI is, is currently being marketed to be used and will be used, I believe, in the future. I'll just throw out a couple things that I found. So everybody knows that the legal research is an application that it's being used for right now very successfully. I've been playing around with this particular tool with AI, and even some AI research tools that are branded, they're created specifically for lawyers, trained entirely on legal data sets, and they do get it wrong. Even if it's a big brand firm telling you this does not hallucinate, it's your practice. It's your license on the line. So don't take anyone's word for it. Don't take any computer's word for it yet. I think it will come along, and we've seen how quickly these things are advancing. Predictive analytics, I think, are quite fascinating. That was actually mentioned. So you can take a given fact set, run it up against who your fact finders are and your jurisdiction and the law, and you can kind of get a sense of what this case is going to do. Discovery, the bane of many associates' existence. AI capabilities are there now, I assess, technically, to radically reduce the amount of hours that go into both drafting, responding to, digesting, understanding discovery. And I suspect the tool is out there that it gets it right, but I haven't quite found it yet. And if anybody, especially discovery, I'm an associate. I would like to know about whatever anybody's found about the best kind of discovery tools. Drafting is something that I would really like that metaphor of kind of you have the GPT will give you the big block of wood and then you can carve it down. Drafting is also, there are also tools right now in the legal marketplace to help you with drafting. They're coming along quickly. You can take that for what it is. I have found that, another thing I talked about was virtual legal assistants. And legal assistants right now are still very clunky, is what I've found, and not really useful for administrative tasks like scheduling or intake, document assembly. Again, I think it's going to progress really quickly. An idea that I had that I think so also on my how I drafted my paper was I kind of iterated back and forth with GPT. Hey, how are we going to be using, how are lawyers going to be using this stuff in the future? And one thing that I think I'll take the majority of credit for, but GPT gets a lot, was judicial, I called it judicial prompting, judicially customized prompts. So I read the things that judges have to read, and I'm sorry for those judges often. And if I were a judge, I would really love to have kind of an LLM that I would just open source out there and say, if you're going to file in my courtroom, you need to run it through this LLM, and so it needs to be written in this manner. And so it will eliminate all the excess wordiness, get the citations right, and really get down to the point. I think that this is going to be an interesting, also, it's kind of side by side with drafting. This is, I think, a big area that the market will capitalize on. What I called artificially enhanced judicial logic was talked on earlier. It's being used now. Problematic, but a lot of potential. And then I also talk about real-time body and language analysis. LLMs are able to do just amazing things. They're able to kind of guess at whether you're telling the truth by the tone of your voice and their sentence structure. I just listened to a podcast yesterday. There's a company owned by Google where LLMs are starting to master olfactory senses. I mean, there's all sorts of things that LLMs can do And I think that if you are a litigator in a courtroom and you were allowed to have a camera trained on a jury, I think an LLM could tell you a whole lot about how your arguments are landing with the jury pool. I think they could, in real time, suggest language adjustments or mannerism adjustments that you could make. I think they could also tell you how the judge is reacting, not just by what the words are actually saying, but what the intonations mean. I think these things are possible. We'll see if they're allowed in the courtroom. And then one thing I love to think about is the future of legal skills and training young attorneys, new attorneys, training attorneys. And just, I mean, I have a kid in elementary school. What is this world going to look like? And I think it's just so fascinating to think that we're going to have to all, again, get back to basics about the ethics of AI, understand the problems, the potential, and the utility of it so that we can embrace it and recognize that, you know, if you're using GPT to draft iterations of your paper, that's not cheating. That's working productivity. That's working really efficiently and productively. You just need to make sure that you're doing your research right and you're getting all the facts right. And that's the world we live in today. So I also kind of just want to comment again on it's interesting that we're all here, and it's a pretty good turnout. But I found that when I talk to attorneys, a lot of them kind of just don't want to talk about it. It's just kind of like, I'm doing what I'm doing, man. I'm busy. I got good practice. I'm working on various things. But AI is just not something that I found that many attorneys want to talk about. And I think that's really interesting. Thanks.
Thank you.